All right, we had a pod before OTAs. We have a pod after. Well, not OTAs, but the media portion of OTAs, because now we got to talk about everything we actually saw, Matt. I mean, we talked about what we might see, what it would look like. We made some predictions, and now we can actually talk about what we did see here on It's Always Game Day in Buffalo. It was good to be back out there, though, on Tuesday for sure.
It was incredible to be back out there because for everybody who is listening, the first time the Bills had an OTA practice earlier in the offseason, we were not allowed to actually watch the practice. We talked to the guys, but Sal, we didn't watch the practice. So when we went out on the practice field on Tuesday, it felt like old times again, getting out on the field, having the sun come down and hit you in the face, watching the guys practice and everything. It took me back to football. I missed it. I missed that feeling. It was good to actually, I know it's very loose what we're calling football here. Guys in shorts and T-shirts and, jerseys and not really the full equipment, but it was still really cool to be back out there.
It was great, and it felt like a training camp practice to me. And I say that because it was energetic, it was crisp, and I think that they kind of did everything they normally do, except for the hitting part. Of course, you can't hit people, but even some training camp practices, you're, kind of more of a, hey, lay off a little bit. But it felt like they were hitting the ground running, so to speak, which I guess shouldn't be a surprise, right? This is a team that is loaded with veterans, loaded with guys who've been around a while. It's a coaching staff that's been around a long time together. So it's not like they're, they have to ramp up and kind of teach new things and install new things. Yes, there's some of that goes on, especially with a new defensive coordinator and Sean McDermott and play caller. But honestly, Matt, I think that they're at a point already here at the end of May where it's like, hey, we do a little bit of classroom work and then we go on the field and we are ready to rock and roll.
I think for me, going out there reminded me how deep of a team they have. You know what I mean? You go out there and you're watching the guys warm up. So what happens is they'll do a stretch, an individual drill, and then they'll all run over to one side of the field. And the offense will line up in one big line, the defense will line up in one big line. And you're just kind of looking at all of the guys there. And you're going down the line and you're like, wow, that guy's good. That guy's good. That guy's good. You forget how talented they are. I think when most people think of the Bills, most of the people I'm sure who listen to this podcast are very big Bills fans. But outside of the Bills bubble, you go to Josh Allen, you go to Stephon Diggs, and then maybe you go to Von Miller and a couple of the guys on the defense. But from top to bottom, if you're just talking about their 22 starters, maybe you can say the linebacker spot because Matt Milano was also a notable absence from the practice. So they were kind of rotating in guys there. Besides the linebacker spot, there's really not a weak link on the team, or at least I don't think there is, because I think if you went back to last year, you would say, what was the weak link? It was the offensive line play. I think they did a lot to address that this year. So you see McGovern out there. You see Torrance out there. You see kind of the rotation going. We're expecting more from Deion Dawkins. And then when you see them all lining up in a practice, even without Diggs and Milano, you're like, yeah, these guys are pretty talented. They've got some serious talent on this roster.
They do. I still think that they arguably have the best overall roster in the NFL. I mean, it's debatable. I think the Eagles roster is really good. The Chiefs, of course, roster is really good. There's several teams that could lay claim to that, but I think the Bills are right in that mix for the discussion of best top to bottom roster. And then when you add on one of the best quarterbacks in the league, I think that's why they're obviously in the discussion once again as one of the top 3, 4, 5 at worst teams as far as betting odds to win the Super Bowl. I think usually they're 3 or 4 if you look at most Vegas odds. Let's talk about guys being absent, guys not being there. We made a prediction on Stephon Diggs. We were both right. He did not show up to voluntary OTAs. And of course it is voluntary. There's still going to be a talk about it. There's still going to be a story about it until he shows up. Let's see we don't know when that's going to happen. Von Miller, I thought, was very eloquent on it. He was asked after to give his perspective. And he said, hey, he's a superstar on and off the field. Nobody really questions anything about that. Like he went into it for a little over a minute, and it was all the nice stuff that you would hear a guy say about their teammate who they believe, hey, when he gets here, he's ready to rock and roll. No issue whatsoever about it. And I wouldn't expect anything different from a guy like Von Miller. Josh Allen basically said the same thing. And Josh even said, hey, without him here, some guys are getting some reps that are pretty valuable that they wouldn't get if he was here. So that obviously matters as well. He pointed to Trent Sherfield, who we could talk about as far as him being impressed with him. But that was the most notable absent along with Matt Milano. But I will tell you, just Matt Milano, for everybody to know, he's been at everything so far. So I'm guessing he'll be here in short order. He just wasn't on the field when we were there Tuesday, but he's been at every other workout that I know of.
Yeah, the only other notable name that was not there is Latavius Murray, right? I can't think of anybody else. Am I missing anybody?
Yes. There was Greg Manns. That was it. Latavius Murray, Greg Manns, Matt Milano, and Stephon Diggs.
So shout out really for incredible attendance across the board from the Bills.
That's right.
That's really, really good to have just 4 guys who are not there for, once again, voluntary workouts. I think Von Miller kind of poured some water on any flames that were out there with the Stephon Diggs stuff. I never really thought it was a big deal. We talked about on the last podcast how we think that he needs to say something, but that also doesn't mean that it's a big deal. You just need to hear him say, it's not a big deal, which I think is ultimately going to happen. I almost get the sense, though, that he's not showing up till mandatory minicamp, which still not the end of the world, whatever. But the way Von was talking about it, we both kind of thought, okay, he won't be there for the first one. Maybe he shows up for the second one or something like that. I kind of get the sense now that he's probably not going to be there from any of the voluntary workouts. But like he said, Von said it better than I can say it. He's a superstar. I have no doubts that Stephon Diggs will be ready to play football once things get cooking again. And I think he's just going to kind of pick up where he left off. I think that he really just is frustrated with how the season ended.
Yeah.
And for a guy to be competitive like that, for a guy to be fiery like that, I think that's what makes Stephon Diggs. If he didn't have that edge, if he didn't have that fire in him, he's probably not half the player that he is. And also, Josh Allen, king of the kind of positive spin on things. But there is something to be said about those other guys getting looks and getting reps because they're not going to get as many reps when Stephon Diggs is there. Like Trent Sherfield isn't going to get kind of featured as much as he was on Tuesday when Diggs is there. But that is a good opportunity for really all of them, for Josh and for the other wide receivers.
When I say, which we both did last podcast, when I say, Stephon needs to address what happened at the end of the season. That's just something that needs to happen. I'm not coming from a place of, oh my God, we got to hear from him. What happened? Dig in, a CSI investigation. The biggest reason I say it, Matt, is I think it will just be better for the whole team once it's done, that nobody has to worry about it anymore. Nobody has to question it anymore. It's not a distraction. It's not a talking point. I don't think it goes away until that happens. You know what I mean? I think that's why, to me, it's important he says something. It's not that, oh my God, we got to hear from Stephon Diggs. I can't believe this guy. That's not why. To me, it's, hey, the quicker this can be done, the quicker they can get on with football and not having to hear about it anymore.
I tend to agree with that. And I do think that once that happens, it's going to go away. And this is also, once again, coming from the scope of people who cover the Bills, people who follow the Bills for a living, and fans out there who care about the Bills. The Stephon Diggs situation is not by any stretch a national story right now. It's not something that's dominating the headlines around the league. I think it's just something that's here in Buffalo. People are wondering, when are we going to see Stephon Diggs? When's he going to come back? But this has not reached the magnitude of, oh my goodness, this is a really big deal that he's not here. Let me ask you this. This is a nice little exercise really for, people who cover the team and people who follow the team along. We went out to practice on Tuesday. Practice ends, and we had our executive producer there with us. And that's not normal, but, we're trying a couple new things here at Channel 7. And I asked him, what do you think the biggest story from the day is? What do you think the biggest story from the day was, from phase 2, day 1 of OTAs? What was the biggest thing you took away?
The biggest thing I took away, or the biggest story? Because I think those could be two different things.
Let's say biggest story, and then we'll talk about our biggest takeaways.
Biggest story.
Was it DeMar?
I think for a lot of people it is. Yeah, probably, because, Matt, what was interesting to me was we were told that everything's good, right? He's cleared just like everybody else, like the doctors cleared him and all that. And I was kind of surprised that he wasn't practicing unless there was a new injury. Like, if it's related to everything that happened with him, that kind of was a surprise to me, because from what we had heard, that wouldn't be the case. Like, he's just going to be inserted and play just like everybody else. And that was what I think I took away from the previous press conferences, which obviously wasn't the case.
I still actually, though, feel like it was a step in the right direction. Even though he wasn't a full participant, when we talked to Sean the morning of Tuesday, when we went out to OTAs, he said that he was not going to be practicing. But then we got out onto the field, and he was there with his teammates, and then he was kind of doing individual stuff. Now, if this was a regular season, he would have been listed probably as limited. He was not a full participant. But given where he was, the fact that he's going out there and hitting the sleds and he's, running routes with the defensive backs and stuff like that, I think there is something to be said about him being farther along in this process than originally anticipated. So, yeah, maybe it was a bit of a surprise that he wasn't a full participant given what we heard during the last OTAs. but I still took it as a step in the right direction.
Was that your answer? That was the biggest story of the day when your executive producer asked you?
So
Or you asked him?
we kind of settled on there wasn't one big story, so let's hit multiple things briefly. Because, when you're dealing with a local news segment, you're talking about a minute and a half, 2 minutes. So it was boom, boom, boom. So I think we said something along the lines of, Stephon Diggs isn't here, but we are. His teammates don't seem to care. We heard from Von Miller. Then it was like, who was there? Damar Hamlin, but he wasn't a full participant. Still, though, a step in the right direction. Then there was something from Sean, and then it was, oh, look, Josh Allen. And if you want to know why people care so much about Josh Allen, I posted a quick 74-second video of Josh Allen, okay? Very quick. These numbers are not earth-shattering. These are not regular season numbers by any stretch. Don't overestimate, because I don't want to make it seem like this is crazy. How many people do you think viewed that 74-second video of Josh Allen on Twitter?
Over the last 24 hours, I guess, right? Since we're recording this, 15,000.
153,000.
Oh my gosh.
153,000 people watched a video of Josh Allen practicing on the field. That's how much hunger there is for Bills football to be back. That's also just how great the fan base is. Like that you can just post a video of Josh Allen throwing at a net and throwing to players, and people are like, oh my gosh, look at Josh Allen. I got like dietitians in the comments that are like, he looks pretty lean. I got people who are talking about his throwing motion. I got a little bit of everything in the comments.
Well, speaking of Josh Allen, he was very impressed with one player, and I'll tell you what I took away from OTAs on Tuesday. The story that I wrote at WGR550.com was about the people who made impressions on me. You asked what I took away, Matt.
Yes.
From OTAs. And the people that made impressions on me.
I know who you're going to say as your first person, because I think it'd be the same person for me.
I don't know if it'd be the first person, but the three people that I have.
Ooh.
Is your first person offense or defense?
Can I guess?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to say you had 2 offense and 1 defense.
Vice versa. I had 2 defense, 1 offense.
Okay, my guess is the offensive person was Trent Sherfield.
Incorrect.
Oh,
right position. For Josh Allen, it was Trent Sherfield. For me, it was Gabe Davis.
Okay.
Gabe Davis was making catches, man, everywhere.
Yeah.
Now, it is important to note a few things here. We have to tell everybody. Obviously, there's no hitting. The DBs are not breaking passes up by making contact. If the play is close, they're going to allow the catch to be made, just so everybody knows. They're trying to be in position. The other thing is we cannot tell you where people were lining up. We can't tell you what happened on a certain play. A guy came out of the backfield. A guy was running a certain route. He lined up in the slot. We can't tell you all of that. That's just normal reporting rules. We can tell you that Sean McDermott said Dorian Williams is playing some middle linebacker. That's what he said. We can tell you that John Butler said Christian Benford is a cornerback, but he has all the prerequisites to line up at safety if they need him. We can tell you all of that. I will tell you Gabe Davis was a beast from what I saw. The 2 guys on defense that impressed me. One was Taylor Rapp. Now, I think it's easy to say, this isn't like state secrets. Without Jordan Poyer, who was there but not participating, or Damar Hamlin, who was there and not participating, obviously you're going to get more reps for guys like Taylor Rapp. They're just going to be on the field a little bit more. They don't have as many guys out there. Matt, he was around the ball a lot.
Yeah.
He was where he needed to be a lot. And the other guy that I was very impressed with, and it puts a smile on my face to talk about it. I think Tre'Davious White looked like old, confident Trey to me, the way he was moving out there.
Yeah, it wasn't even just the way it was moving; it was also the way he was carrying himself. It almost was 100%. Like it was almost like a flashback to 2021 before the injury. One of the things we talked about on the last podcast was some of the things we look for at an OTA practice, and one of the things I said was I look to see what the leaders are doing, how they're carrying themselves, who they're hanging around with, what their kind of general vibe is. Trey had the juice back. Trey looked like the old Trey, laughing, joking around, giving a hard time to other people, getting in the face of some of his teammates, chirping a little bit here and there, all in good fun. But I agree with you that there was just kind of this new sense of like, okay, he's back. Now, we need to see it in a game. We need to see it continuously, not one good game. We need to see a stretch here. I think you hit it on Trey. I appreciate what you said about Taylor Rapp. I think it's very clear Taylor Rapp is here to play football. He is not here to be on the bench and be a depth player. They will get him on the field in unique ways that we have not seen in years past. There's 2 other players that I want to highlight. One of them just being from strictly his stature, and this is defensively I'm talking about, Poona Ford is massive. He is a massive
Yes, he
human
is.
being. Like, he's basically the same height as me. But I remember I was over by where they were warming up, the defensive lineman, and I'm like, wow, that guy is really big. You know who else is a freak just like athletically? Shane Ray. Did you look at him at all?
I didn't really zero in on him. I'm glad you brought him up because I didn't get a chance to really zero in on him. But it doesn't surprise me what you're saying because, I mean, this is a former first-round pick who had a very illustrious career as an edge rusher of Missouri.
Yeah. You know, the first reason why I noticed Shane Ray was because he was wearing number 49. So I looked and I saw number 49.
Yes.
And it almost took me back a little bit. I'm like, that's not Tremaine. And then you look at him, and they were doing this drill, and I posted the video on social media. It's not like it's, anything crazy, but he hits the sled and just throws it to the side. Like I would throw like a stuffed animal off to the side. He threw a sled, and I'm just like, wow, this guy's big. And then while we were having a press conference with Von Miller, Shane Ray walked out of the locker room because he was doing an interview with somebody. And I just looked at him and I'm like, that guy is huge. And it was him. So I don't want to set the bar too high for this guy. He has not played in the NFL in a long, long time, but maybe they're going to hit, I don't want to say a home run with Shane Ray, but maybe you hit a single or a double and the guy ends up making your team because there is a position to kind of be had at that spot.
He is listed as 6'3", 255. So he's
bigger than
super
6'3".
athletic, right? He's super athletic, no doubt.
Yeah, he's bigger than that.
So everybody knows we talked about DeMar. They're not participating. Jordan Poyer was there, didn't participate. He was just basically helping out, like kind of like a coach in the sidelines. Didn't look like he had anything necessarily wrong with him, but whatever the reason was. Mitch Morse came out a little bit later, so whatever was happening there, he was there, but he didn't participate. Jordan Phillips was on the side with trainers during the workout, and Von Miller was there, and he was being GM Von basically. He wasn't participating; he was all over the field, talk with everybody. So he had 5 players who were there and not participating, but a part of it. Then we also had, Sean McDermott and, trying to see if he's doing anything different. Now, I didn't notice him do anything different, whether that's take any light off of himself to give to somebody else. But I thought it was interesting. He gave some insight, Matt, which is, like in a 2-minute drill, normally he spots the ball and he lets the guy, he kind of plays referee as the coaches do their thing. That's not going to happen this year. He's calling the defense. He's got to call the play. He's going to have Matthew Smiley spot the ball basically and do that. So it is going to be a little bit different as we, like, if you go out to fans here listening, if you go out to training camp, you might see a little bit of a Sean McDermott type of, way he goes about practice himself.
Yeah, it was interesting that one of the things Josh Allen brought up as far as Sean McDermott is concerned is Josh was saying that they're talking a little junk back and forth now that he's the one calling plays on defense. Like Josh is going to try and expose him when they're during practice, and Sean is going to try and make Josh look bad or make some mistakes, which, I know the cliche that they always throw out there is iron sharpens iron, but maybe that will turn into a little bit of something that's fun to kind of watch. I also asked Sean during the press conference what he misses most about kind of being a defensive coordinator, going back to his roots a little bit. And he said that, and I agree with this, the job of a head coach is a leadership job. You have to kind of watch over everything that's happening on the football team, and you have to kind of be paying attention to a little bit of everything. He's still the head coach. That is still his primary focus. But my guess would be that on the day-to-day now, he's thinking a lot more about the defense than he's thinking about what the other stuff was back in the day. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. Like I've said multiple times, I like that, there's going to be some accountability tied to this. If the defense is good, then Sean is really, really good at being a head coach and calling plays defensively. And if they're not, then maybe you need to end this experiment and you need to bring in a legitimate defensive coordinator next season. So I'm really interested to see how this trial goes, but I do like it. I really do think that they have the potential with the personnel they have and with McDermott calling the plays to be as dominant as they've been in, I don't know, since 2019. That's what they ultimately need to get back to. If you can come, I know on paper, the defense has been very good for very long, but I've always said, if you could combine the 2019 defense with the offense of 2020 or even 2021, that team wins the Super Bowl. That's where they need to get to. And I know that's not an easy thing to figure out, but my goodness, would it be scary if that's something they can pull off.
Yeah, I agree with you about the combination of McDermott and the personnel, and just my respect for him as a defensive play caller. Shouldn't say it that way. We haven't seen it. As a defensive head coach, the defensive mind. I have a lot of respect for him, and I do think that this is going to be a really interesting change. It could be a very beneficial one, but we'll see, because I think that the question is going to be for everybody how he manages all that stuff while still being the head coach and making those decisions on challenges and timeouts and all those other things that go into the day-to-day operation, the game day on Sunday operation. So we'll see how all that turns out. In the meantime, the Bills are back at OTAs all the rest of this week as we talk. They have, 3 days this week. They have 3 days next week, 3 days the week after. So they basically have 3 full weeks of OTAs, and then they have a mandatory mini camp on the 4th week, and then that's going to be it. We are only out there every Tuesday as a media to talk to these guys, to kind of get some quotes from coaches and players, and to show you some video and to talk about what we see. And again, we can only talk about certain things that we see. That will change at mandatory minicamp, though. We can actually watch all 3 days and be out there a little bit more, even though we can't still report on a lot of things that we see. While we are out there on Tuesday, the NFL passed yet another rule. We talked about 2 of them, and then another one passed. All right, Matt. So the NFL has now passed the fair catch on a kickoff rule. This is the college rule, essentially.
Yeah.
What's going to happen now is if a team pooches a kickoff or just tries to get you down to the 5 or inside the 10 or whatever, if the kick returner fair catches it, which, by the way, you could always fair catch a kickoff. It's always been allowed. The difference is you'd get the ball there, whereas now, if you're inside the 25-yard line, it goes right to the 25-yard line. It's essentially considered a touchback. If you fair catch it at the 30, you get it at the 30. Or the 27, you get the 27. But if it's inside the 25-yard line, it goes to the 25-yard line. At the owners' meetings in Arizona, this was brought up. I asked several people about this, personnel people around the league, coaches, and basically to a person, they said they didn't like it. They didn't like it because it's strategy. It's football. Like, this is how you basically try to be better than your opponent. And personnel people said this to me, which is rosters have guys on their team they're paying specifically to cover kicks. It's not as easy as we'll just cut those guys. You got money tied up, cap hit implications. If you're going to do it, wait a couple years so teams can adjust their roster. That's not the case. The NFL did it now.
I hear what you're saying, and I understand their viewpoint. I don't think it's that big of a deal. I don't think it's something that will really be in play that often, unless I'm completely wrong. And maybe there's special teams coordinators out there who are like, you will try and kick it short of the goal line, and we're going to dare them to just basically take it at the 25. And we know that we're not going to give up a big return, or we know that something bad isn't going to happen or anything like that. Maybe that's the case. I just don't see that.
What do you think is not going to happen that much? Because haven't we seen a lot of teams kicking it just short of the goal line over the last several years? The Bills do it a lot.
Yeah, well, they didn't do it when they were supposed to on the biggest
Correct.
day.
And by the way, that is actually a great point to bring up, that this is when it would really matter. If you're in a situation at the end of a game where you try to pooch it and say, hey, just pooch kick it, that team's going to fair catch it, get it at the 25-yard line. So you're right about that. But I am saying on a week-to-week basis, Tyler Bass, this is something they've done with him. They've asked him to kick it down to the 2 or 3 yard line, and he's done a pretty good job of that when they've asked him to do it.
I guess the question is, do you know if the fair catch attempt is muffed? Is it a live ball?
Yes, of course.
Okay, so but it's not
just like a punt then.
Okay, so it's just like a punt then. Is the rule still in place where if you catch it with 1 foot inbounds and 1 foot out of bounds, that you get it at the 40? I would think.
I don't know. Why would that have to do with anything?
I guess it wouldn't, but I'm just saying, like, the sidelines have never really been in play. So even if they just kick it short, I don't know. I just think that what's the difference between fair catching it or just letting it go into the end zone and getting it at the 25? Because it's not like
a lot of balls that land at the 5 aren't going to go in the end zone. They might come backward. They might, you just don't take that chance sometimes.
Yeah, but with the Bills,
chance.
Yeah, I guess You're right. I just don't think it's going to be that big
It's a live ball once it goes 10 yards.
Yeah, no, I get that. I'm just saying, like,
unless it goes in the end zone, then it is a touchback.
That's what I mean. Like, I know that that's something that they've tried to do. And every time they do it, the 13 seconds gets brought up and you're like, why couldn't you do that there? That's something that Tyler Bass is
they could have
at,
squibbed it at 13 seconds and that would have taken this out of play completely.
And which is what I think now is just going to happen. I think teams are just going to squib kicks because then, you take the fair catch rule out of it. You can still kick it short and you're still hoping the chaos happens.
Okay. So then my point is, then it does matter a ton if teams are going to do that. That's a huge difference to squib kick. Like most squib kicks are going to be fielded at like the 15-yard line by the up man.
I just don't think the personnel makes that big of a difference. Like, I think that's teams in the NFL not wanting change. Maybe it impacts the gameplay more, but from a personnel standpoint, I don't think it makes that big of a difference. I don't think I don't think there's any roster decisions the Bills are making based off of this new rule.
It's close. You might be right. I think about a guy like Tyler Matakevich.
Like Saran Neal.
No, Saran Neal's different. He's a gunner on punts.
Yeah.
Tyler Matakevich is not. Tyler Matakevich is a kickoff tackling guy.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so what is his use? What's his use now? You could still keep him on the team and say, yeah, was Stilger going to use you like that? But couldn't you make an argument that a guy like that who literally has led the NFL in special teams tackles over the last several years. I don't know if he still does. I know he did as of a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
Like that guy is getting over $1 million a year to cover kicks. That's his job.
But do you really think teams will start doing the fair catching that much that you have no need, but you make that person obsolete?
I do think teams will start fair catching more. Yes.
Okay.
I do agree with you that it's not going to lead to a lot of teams doing what you're saying because so many guys have like a Saran Neal on their team as opposed to Tyler Matakevich, where they do have multiple roles. Even Tyler Matakevich does. He plays on punt team. He plays on kick return, things like that. I just think this is interesting. I want to see how this is played out because why were so many special teams coaches opposed to it? Because it's a strategy to try and pin a team deep.
I think they're also opposed to it because a lot of people in the NFL don't like change, even when change makes sense. And I think that's probably the biggest thing. Now, my point is I probably did a bad job of explaining it. I think my moral is just like, it really is not going to change that much. At least that's my opinion on it. I really don't think this is going to have that big of a difference on a game that we watch. And if it does and I'm wrong, then I guess I'm wrong. I just don't think – I think teams are still going to trust their guys to try and make a play. So the fair catches aren't going to happen. If you're the Bills – and you're paying Nyheim Hines and Deontay Hardy, and you're paying these guys decent money to be your primary special teams returners, you're going to try and let them make a play. You just are. So I
think that's right, especially see, here's where it could really matter. If there are teams that say, hey, we're going to lighten up on these guys we're paying to cover kicks, it's not going to matter. Now, the other team may say, well, if you're not going to prioritize covering the kick, we're going to return it down your throat.
Yeah, you might be right. I just think that it's one of those. Go ahead. You were about to say.
So I do think a guy like Nyheim Hines would come into play even more so as a return man in that play. You tell him, hey, just take it down. They don't have the guys to cover the kick. But I think from my standpoint as a return, if I'm the special teams coach, I think I'm instructing my guys to fair catch if it's near the 2-3 yard line. I'm just gonna get to the 25-yard line, dude. Why risk a fumble? Why risk it? Normally, the average starting field position is right around there anyway.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that it's all risk reward. It's what are you looking for? Are you willing to? I think back to the Tywan Jones play against the Steelers when he got it in the end zone. He tried to take it out, then he tried to run sideways, and the Bills took over at the 2-yard line. Now, luckily, they had a 98-yard touchdown, so it really didn't matter. But that's the risk that you're kind of coming into play here. I think if you've got Nyheim Hines or Deontay Hardy, you like the idea because what's the worst case? Obviously a fumble or a turnover is the worst case, but are you really that upset if they return it and you start at the 23 or the 20?
No, I agree with you.
As opposed to the 20. You know what I mean? Like I think back to the Patriots game and you don't win that game without Nyheim Hines in making those plays. So I don't know. I think teams might be not really receptive to the rule change because they're trying to hide things that they don't have on special teams maybe too. Like if you're not a good special teams, if you don't have good personnel on your special teams units, then maybe you would be more opposed to it. And the Bills always say how much they care about special teams. So this
right.
should be something that they favor.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, you're probably right. It probably doesn't change much, but I do think it will change some things here or there for some teams, and that's where I'm interested to see like what teams will try to take advantage or not take advantage. What teams will just basically say, "Hey, we're still going to do everything like we normally do." All right, we got to get out of here. We'll do that here very quickly before I go. I'm going to ask you to give me, if you take a look, we know how we've talked about the Bills' road schedule, like in all the good
Yes.
games. Take a look at their home schedule. Okay, take out the
Yep.
London game. Do not count it as a home game. All right.
Yep.
You are a Bills fan who goes to one game a year. One
Okay.
game a year.
Good
What is
question.
the game you're going to at home this year?
Ooh.
You could choose
I
any
think.
game. What's the
Hmm.
most attractive game to you for whatever reason?
That is a great question. Okay. I would say. This is tricky because I'm between 3 games. Okay.
Ooh,
The,
all
the
right.
games I'm between are the
Uh-huh.
Raiders at home, the home opener,
Uh-huh.
the next home game, which is the Dolphins on October 1st,
1 o'clock. Beautiful October 1st. Yep.
and the Cowboys at the end of the season.
Ooh, yeah.
Personally, I
It
don't
is in
mind.
December, though. You got to remember that. It's the weather.
That's what I was going to say. If you were planning a trip to come to Buffalo, like if you were not in Buffalo, if you're not in Western New York, I think I would take the Dolphins game. An elite fall day against a division opponent, a good team. You probably have a healthy Tua at that point. It's early in the season. I want to see that game. If you're somebody who lives in Buffalo and you just go to one game a year and this is not like a trip here, then I'm taking the Cowboys game because it's not like you get to see the Cowboys in Buffalo very often. It's late in the season, so there's playoff implications. It's a 4:25 game, which is cool, especially at that point in the season. You'll have like the first quarter will be light out and then it'll be dark and the lights will be on and everything. So that would be my answer. If you're local, I would say the Cowboys. If you're traveling from out of town and you want to get your Buffalo Bills experience, I'd say the Dolphins. How about you?
I love the way you laid it out. I think I'd go Raiders over Dolphins, though. Home opener. I want to see my
Mm-hmm.
team win, right? Like, I
Yeah.
mean, you never know. The Dolphins could spoil the
Mm-hmm.
party there. It's going to be beautiful. September 17th. Great time to come to Orchard Park. I debated the Giants Sunday Night Football against the New York Giants and Brian Dable. That's going to be cool, right? I mean, I
Yeah.
think so. But it is a night game. It's tougher. Man, I haven't thought about the other night games. Buccaneers, Broncos. Those are night games. You think it's cool to go to a night game, but I think I say Raiders home opener just because that time of year you think they're gonna win. It's just it's warm out. I think that's what I would choose.
Guess what I did 10 minutes before we hopped on this podcast to start recording?
Bought tickets to the Raiders game.
No. I booked my flight. I booked my flight to London is what I did.
Love it. When you going?
Yeah. So I'll leave Wednesday.
All right.
But with the time difference, it really is just kind of a lost day. So get in super late on Wednesday evening and then boots on the ground, get started on Thursday. It's going to be nonstop and it's going to be awesome. I know I've heard from so many Bills fans who are trying to make this trip. So many Bills fans. So I'm excited to kind of see how many people ultimately end up going. I can tell you I know of 2 Bills fans who are definitely making the trip, and that is my parents, because they also booked a flight to get to London to go watch the Bills play. So they're very excited about that too. So it'll be cool.
I can tell you 2 more fans, my wife and son. They will be there.
Yeah, there you go. So
they'll be in Germany, then France, then London. They get to they're making an excursion out of it, and then I get to go basically for a couple of days.
Yeah, so basically what I'm thinking too is I'm glad you brought up the Germany and Paris or France point, because that's something I think my parents are trying to do too. They're going to hop on a train and they've never been to Paris. So what a cool way to knock it out that you're already over there. You hop on a train, you go to Paris for a day, and then you come back and then you watch the Buffalo Bills play football. Talk about a culture just shock of 2 different things of like, oh, go have wine and cheese at the base of the Eiffel Tower and then get on a train and then you watch the Bills play the Jags for some good old Buffalo fun.
All right, we got to get out of here. Thanks for joining us as always. Subscribe, download, all that neat jazz. YouTube on video as well. At Sal Sports is the YouTube channel. But of course, all the audio that you could ever need at Always Game Day in Buffalo is right there at iTunes, Spotify, Odyssey app. Matt, Channel 7, WKBW TV in Buffalo. And Matt, I mean, have a great Memorial Day weekend, buddy. I don't know what you got planned. It's going to be beautiful out, though.
I am playing my 3rd and 4th round of golf of the year tentatively. I am playing in a tournament this weekend, so we'll
Yes.
see how I do. I think I've heard from people that your handicap skyrockets when you have a child, and I have not. I've maybe played once since I had our daughter, so it's going to be ugly. It's going to be very ugly, quite frankly. How about you? You got any big plans?
Yeah, we have a baseball tournament actually, a little league tournament. So it's always a good Memorial Day tournament going on in North Buffalo. Shown. Come on out, watch some kids play baseball. But yeah, we got a baseball tournament going on, and I'll try to get a little golf in eventually. I mean, I did play a little bit. I'm playing now on a Wednesday night league with some of the WGR guys. A little 9-hole Delaware Park action, so that's cool to get my golf fix in. But otherwise,
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's gonna be a lot of baseball this weekend. So enjoy the weekend with you and your family, and enjoy the weather out there. And everybody have a great, happy, safe, healthy Memorial Day weekend. We'll talk to you next time. And it's always game day in Buffalo.